Good afternoon and welcome to the pre-proposal conference for the Human Exploration Research Opportunities Appendix D. My name is Steve Platts and I am the Deputy Chief Scientist with the Human Research Program. What we're going to do here is we're going to go through a brief presentation, give you guys some more information, and then we will open it up for questions that we have a number of people here in the room. Hopefully we can answer those for you. Next slide. So this conference is intended to clarify the solicitation and hopefully improve the quality and responsiveness of the proposals that we see. So this is our opportunity to give you some more information and clarify things that may not have been clear, and also your opportunity to ask us questions, and hopefully we can make those even more clear. This conference is public and open to all. All questions and answers and discussion between us here at NASA and the attendees will be accessible to all and will be posted on the NSPIRE's website, and you can see the address there. Some questions may be deferred to allow sufficient time for us to provide an accurate answer. We have a few people here in the room, so we may have to confer to make sure we give you the most accurate information possible. Next slide. So the Human Research Program focuses on an applied research set of goals. We are not NIH in space. We don't have the resources, both monetarily and from subject number and opportunity, to do those kind of things. So what we do is perform the research necessary to understand and reduce spaceflight human health and performance risks in support of exploration. So we have a list of identified risks that we work towards ameliorating. We enable development of human spaceflight medical and human performance standards, and then we help develop and validate technologies that serve to characterize, monitor, and reduce medical risks associated with spaceflight. So when we talk about standards, we can talk about things like the amount of exercise to be prescribed. We can talk about permissible exposure limits for radiation or other things. Those are the types of activities we're talking about. Next slide. This is the big picture exploration scope that NASA is presenting. So right now we are in phase 0. We're working on the International Space Station in low Earth orbit, and our research is to enable exploration, which are the other phases. The next phase, phase 1, would be to establish missions in cislunar space using a deep space gateway and a deep space transport. So the goal is to put a small station in cislunar orbit around the moons and to do what research we can from that facility. Phase 3 would be to complete those studies and conduct Mars verification missions. Discussion we've had would be potentially a 1-year mission or something like that while we're in cislunar orbit, and making those studies more similar to what we might see with longer exploration. Phases 3 and 4 are missions to orbit and or land on the surface of Mars. And as you can see from a timeline, we're talking 2030s for that. Next slide. So the Human Research Program is composed of 5 different elements. The Exploration Medical Capability, or EXMC element, works on medical care for the mission. How do we generate sterile saline from components aboard the station? How do we develop new hardware for medical use on station? How do we give CPR in space? All of those types of things. Human Factors and Behavioral Performance works on interfaces between the human and the vehicle, as well as individual and interpersonal behaviors. Human Health and Countermeasures is really our physiology element. They have work in neurophysiology, cardiovascular, bone, exercise, and others, where they look at how the body is affected by spaceflight. ISSMP is the ISS Medical Projects, and that's really our infrastructure and analog element. They implement the science that everyone else is proposing. So in and of themselves, they're not the same as a science element, but they do a lot of work. And then finally, space radiation is just what it sounds like. They work on radiation exposure and biological effects both. Now, a lot of people, when you say this, you think instantly of cancer, so you're thinking long-term effects, but we're also working on acute effects and other things like oxidative damage, cardiovascular disease, atherosclerosis, and other things that might be affected by radiation, not just cancer. In addition, we fund the Translational Research Institute for Space Health through a cooperative agreement, and their charge is to work on some of the more cutting-edge, outside-the-box types of studies. Next slide, please. We have a number of venues where we conduct our research. Obviously, the first is the International Space Station, top left. Top right is the NASA Research Radiation Laboratory on Long Island. Bottom left is NVCAV. So this is a bed rest facility where we do work in Cologne, Germany. We do this in collaboration with our friends at the DLR and ESA. For isolation, we have the Human Exploration Research Analog, which is here at Johnson Space Center. And then we also have other analogs around the world. The most notable would be NEK in Russia. You may have heard of the Mars 500 mission. That's the same facility, and we will hopefully be doing some longer duration isolation studies there in the near future. Next slide. So I mentioned risk mitigation earlier, and that's really what we're all about. If you look at this chart, it delineates the 6 steps that we have for risk mitigation. Largely, though, what we're talking about are 3 and 4. Identify the research products required to fill the gaps in our knowledge so that we can answer these risks, and then generate research products, whether those products are just knowledge that helps us understand the risk better, or if they're actually countermeasures or what you would call treatments here on Earth, things that we can use to treat a problem that occurs, or hopefully preventative of any potential spaceflight effects on the human body. And then we would also validate those research products and then reassess our gaps. So down the bottom gives you sort of our flow chart on how we develop evidence and then go towards deliverables. Next slide. As you can imagine, because of the environment of spaceflight, we have constraints on schedule, crew access, the need and need for risk mitigations are different from NIH and NSF. Our analogs and the space station are limited resources. We have a very low end. The number of crew members we have available to us are few. And then we don't have all that many opportunities for full team or full crew research. So we need to make very good use of low end. Our investigations should significantly contribute to the risk reduction focus of HRP. They don't have to be highly innovative or outside-the-box solutions. What they have to be is helping us get results that help us address our risks and gaps. It's a slightly different focus than you would imagine for NIH, as we said before. Next slide. So then that brings forward the statistical considerations. Statistics have to be very strong. You can imagine that if you have a low end, for example, you only might get 10 crew members in your research. In fact, 12 would be a fantastic number for most people. So the statistics required to allow us to make calls on this small number of subjects must be very rigorous. Our Step 2 proposal must include a dedicated section on describing the statistical approach or a justification for not needing one. Any proposed sampling procedures, experimental design, and data analysis methodology will be evaluated in our peer review panels by a statistician. We have a statistician on each panel, so we're very serious about the rigor of the statistics in our studies. Next slide. Next one. Thank you. So this is a 2-step solicitation process. Step 1 proposals are submitted to NASA, and they should include a synopsis of the intended research. They're a little bit more work than just a notice of intent or something like that. Those would be due on the 1st of May at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Those Step 1 proposals will then be reviewed for relevancy by NASA, and then only studies that are deemed to be relevant and responsive to the call will be invited to submit a Step 2 proposal. Step 1 proposers will be notified of this decision by the 29th of May. Invited Step 2 proposals are then due on the 30th of July, again at 5 p.m. Eastern. These proposals will be reviewed for merit as well as programmatic relevance. The peer review panels will be conducted by scientific and technical subject matter experts, and then NASA will evaluate the programmatic balance, feasibility, and cost of all of those proposals. So it's very much worth your while to consider when you're writing a Step 2 proposal, can this study actually be accomplished on the International Space Station? Please don't propose to fly a 3 Tesla MRI machine onto the space station. Those types of things are not feasible. The final award decisions will be announced in December of 2018. Next slide. So our solicitation topics for this particular solicitation are as follows. We have 3. The first, cerebrospinal fluid biomarkers for physiological and behavioral effects of spaceflight, an ISS sample sharing opportunity. 2, promoting stress tolerance, adaptability, and behavioral health via enhancing exercise protocols for long-duration exploration mission, LDEM crews. And finally, sensory stimulation for cognitive and behavioral health. Next slide. That concludes our brief introductory presentation, and now we will take written questions, and we will respond from this end verbally. So just give us a second to pull this up on the computer. So we can actually see the question that says, can we type questions, or is this technical support? Nope, you're live, we can see you. So the first question I see for topic 2, does the exercise intervention have to occur in an IC analog?
It's preferred, but we will entertain any justifiable proposal, but the preference is it's got to be adaptable to the space station at some point, or to follow-on missions. So we're really trying to identify an exercise intervention that can occur in a very confined environment that will have the behavioral enhancing effects to reduce stress and to promote adaptability. So with that as the desired end state, a proposal that can address that regardless of the environment is always something that we would consider, but it would have to meet those same kind of qualities that are laid out.
Okay, and I see a question from Lindsay asking if there are only 3 topics. Yes, there are only 3 topics. We have a question from Emmerich. Would a study assessing plant microbe interactions in the context of agricultural crop be appropriate? From our discussion here, that would not be an appropriate topic for any of these 3 specific calls. I see a question from Dorothy that asks if PhD students are allowed to submit proposals or must the PI hold a PhD? We have no requirement for the degree that a person holds to be a principal investigator of our grant. So a student could absolutely write. No radiation topics, that is correct.
Sure. For topic 2, is it preferred or is it mandatory for the Rocky exercise device to be used? And would this device be provided?
That it's preferred, but not absolutely necessary. And we're testing some devices this summer. By the time the solicitation would come out, one of those devices will be down selected. So it's potentially available that we would have access to one of the new devices that are going to be down selected. But by the time, and we'll have more information on that we can put out there on the specifics of those, but those should be down selected by around the August timeframe. Okay, so in which topic would we address interpersonal dynamics, creative problem solving, and reducing psychological stress? So part of that would be, you could potentially address it in both topic 2 and topic 3, because topic 2 is related to reducing stress using, basically topic 2 is focused on how do we enhance the use of exercise to reduce stress and increase resiliency. And topic 3 is looking at when you're in a sensory deprived environment, or if you're in a long duration space flight, how do we enhance sensory stimulation, the types of sensory stimulation that people would need that would in essence increase interpersonal dynamics or interpersonal capabilities, and to ensure that you continue to be able to be reactive to problems. So really you could address it in either one. There's been some interesting research on exercise and problem solving. So if you've got a difficult problem to solve, you exercise and it creates more opportunity to be a creative problem solver. So it really depends on which one best fits your interest. Over.
All right. Our next question is from Mr. Rahman. It says, you have developed many things. Why are all of those absent in the market, and how would you market your already developed products? So HRP is looking at, again, we're looking at risk reduction for exploration applications. In terms of research applications to life on Earth, that is more in tune, a proposal that is more in tune with our colleagues at CASES. And not with HRP.
Okay, so the question related to the use of animal-based studies for topic 2, that could be a component, but cannot be the end state. So the end states relate to the applications for humans. We're in an applied research program for human research, but we do accept animal-based studies as a component of an overall approach that would end with the human application. So with the right justifications, that is possible. Okay, and with regard to, was the individual and team problem-solving skills training for exploration missions, was it resolved, or was the title revised into one of these 3 topics? No, we have delayed the offering of that one until a later solicitation out of, we were accelerating that one, and we decided that our interests were better served by delaying it. So it will come out probably in the July solicitation or later, but it is still a requirement. We just have higher priorities right now to address. And for topic 3, what type of sensory information stimuli is the team most concerned about? The information in the topic lays out the different types of sensory stimulation countermeasures that have been identified. What we're most interested in is identifying what can be used as a countermeasure for a diminished sensory influence. So one of the things that we have seen in some of the long duration is that you get diminished areas on the somatosensory cortex, for example. So the concern is, how do we keep the brain stimulated across vast opportunities, vast stimuli, to ensure that we don't lose that capability? If you think about how London cab drivers, their hippocampus will increase as a result of increased stimulation, we don't want to see diminished capabilities due to diminished sensory information or stimuli. So there's various approaches to that, and we're looking for creative ways to reduce that risk. For topic 2 and 3, could the funding be used to develop a new hardware system capable of being utilized for exercise or sensory stimulation? We do not anticipate that is likely to fund enough to do that, primarily because we also have a requirement whatever hardware system is used has to be flight certified, and so we want something that could be similar to what we might use. You might be able to develop something that's close, but we don't anticipate that the funding is going to be used to develop a system. We're looking for the actual identification of approaches to reduce the risk related to system use. Now, the next one is ONS2. With the small and limited throughput of test volunteers, it would seem that evaluating dose-response relationships would be challenging. What is the projected maximum number of subjects that are feasible during the desired time frame? It depends on if you're proposing a flight study. Okay, sorry, in HERA. So typically we look across a campaign with regard to HERA, and a campaign is typically 4 different missions of 4 individuals each, and so for a total of 16. And so it really is important, as was related in the overview briefing, to establish some tight controls over the processes so that you can get a more robust internal validity to pick out some of these small changes. Now, with the right proposals, we can go across more than one campaign, so across 2 years, to get a total of 32. 32 in, 16 in each campaign, which essentially goes across about a 1-year time frame. The development of in vitro bioreactors that mimic exercise in tissues appropriate. That was not anticipated, that would be what we're looking for. Because of the difficulty in representing that into the kind of the stress reduction component. Now, clearly, if biomarkers that relate to stress, that could potentially be a component of it. If you think about the RDoC approach, where we look at the molecular and cellular changes that could result in physiological changes that result in a neurocircuitry change, but the conceptualization of that to relate it directly to the reduction of stress and increasing of resiliency is a conceptual bridge that would have to be pretty strong to walk across on that one. So we're not saying no, but it would be very challenging. Additional solicitations? Someone else want to respond to that one?
So yes, our anticipation is that another solicitation will come out at the end of July. for Lindsay's question. An RFP. Do you have a target date for an RFP regarding training for exploration?
It would probably be that end of July solicitation is when we're projecting for that one.
Next question from staff is, does NASA provide the human test subject? Yes, we do. If it's an analog study or HERA or something like that, our test subject facility recruits the subjects, and we set up the environment and everything, and we work with the investigators who get funded for the campaigns that Dr. Williams was talking about earlier. If it's for space flight, yes, you can solicit to get the astronauts who are on station. You can't bring your own astronauts with you.
And then it also asks, can we assume that the Inspire's list of standard measures will be routinely measured in these subjects, but can we propose adding additional measurements to that?
So for standard measures, if it's a flight study, we'll have standard measures. If it's for HERA, we're working on those. They are not in place at the moment. When you see a list of standard measures, those are things you should not replicate, but if you need additional measures to either get more time points, or if you augment, or if you need a slightly different analysis, we can work with you on one. Yes, you should propose additional measures, not to propose replicate something else that's already been done. Oops. Is there anything else before augmentation? Brad's question. Okay.
With regards to augmentation strategies, the RFP lists behavioral regimens and specifies mindfulness. As an example, would nutritional regimens be considered as augmentation strategy in this regard? Absolutely, in terms of the ability to reduce stress or enhance the exercise regimen to derive a beneficial effect. But again, the conceptualization matters, and the ability to show how it reduces stress or enhances resiliency is the kind of conceptualization that needs to be represented.
Lindsay, you're welcome. And then the next one is, are sweat-based sensors using a Band-Aid style sensor that could last for 1 or 2 weeks for detecting glucose, lactate, and urea acceptable for topic 1?
No, we don't anticipate that. We anticipate that you will be able to have access to a 1 cc sample pre- and post-slide, as well as pre- and post-slide standard measures. And we expect you to relate what you find in the CSF fluid with standard measures outcomes. I would say in this particular case, we do not anticipate specific equipment for additional measures, but you could suggest maybe an additional time point for standard measures. But that's where we are going, is the CSF sharing that we wish you to concentrate on, as well as the measures done either by Dr. Sanero and Dr. Williams and or standard measures for coordination purposes.
It looks like we've caught up with the questions. Do we have more questions?
What is the maximum duration each day that test volunteers and HERA will be allowed to exercise?
We're scheduled for 1 hour per day of exercise, so we would, I can't imagine we would go more than 2 hours a day. So it would depend on the justification for how long was needed in order to demonstrate, and because we know that exercising too long can have detrimental effects as well, so it would start to counter the effects of the resiliency. But knowing your background, you would propose something that would be consistent with what's known in the literature. Okay, related to Brad's question, are you saying that for topic 2, it is up to the proposers to both advance a countermeasure and to propose metrics to measure reductions in stress and to measure enhancements in resiliency. In essence, yes. So we're looking for a way to use exercise to enhance the resiliency and to reduce stress. So how do we leverage that behavioral component of an exercise regimen? If we don't have other ways to reduce the stress on a mission, is exercise critical as a countermeasure to that stress? So we're looking to leverage or to basically understand what are the contributions of exercise of a particular type of regimen to reduce that stress and to enhance resiliency.
The next question from Jesse. I see on YouTube NASA was building new modules. I hope this was true, and what are the chances of one module being for the behavior modification of space gravity? As far as I know, there is no work being done for a module for such a purpose. From Lindsay, here's an interesting question. How is NASA looking at medical marijuana or cannabinoid derivative for this solicitation? To the best of my knowledge, there is none. From Brad, are there any preliminary data available on the efficacy? I see lots of head shaking now. Okay, you don't have anything yet.
No, not yet. We're in the technical phase right now, and it's later supposed to be tested on the ground and on ice. So we don't have any preliminary data available for this solicitation.
For the marijuana? Not at this time. We don't see the efficacy that's out there to demonstrate that that would be something, again, that kind of falls into the acceptable and feasible. We don't see that as being acceptable or feasible given all the legal requirements. We are a federal agency, and it would be very difficult do something along that line at this point. Are you considering meditation, self-reflection, interpersonal activities to reduce stress? Yes, and that's really an important component to take a look. That's why in the solicitation it says we're not looking to replicate things that we've done in the past. We have a large research project ongoing now that's looking at identifying characteristics of resiliency and biomarkers and social processes related to the biological processes related to kind of social interaction. So we're not looking for replications of existing work. So it would be very important to take a close look at our path to risk reduction and the task book to see what research we've already funded in these areas.
Is there any interest in a pre-mission field-based exercise intervention to develop resiliency prior to the stress of a mission?
Let's say it would, again, depend on the conceptualization and the demonstration of how that bridged into the desired end state for this solicitation. So we're very open to creative solutions to answering our problems. It would just have to be a good, sound, experimental conceptualization as to why and how that was going to contribute to accelerating the answer that we needed. Because what we don't want to do is use valuable pre-mission time. Now, if you're meaning pre-mission, pre-flight, then of course that contributes. But if you're looking at a separate group pre-mission, it just depends. And again, the conceptualization will carry the weight on the linkage back in. Based on experience to date, are there any are there already stress-based metrics and or resiliency-based metrics that are measured on the HERA subjects? In other words, NASA is saying that you know they are stressed and you know that their resilience could be enhanced, and you're just looking for approaches that supplement existing exercise programs to do that, is the question. If so, what are these metrics? Well, what we do know is that isolation and confinement will increase stress, and we do have behavioral health and performance measures that are currently being collected on HERA research participants. And what we have is another research approach that's looking at what are the biomarkers and what are the measures of resilience in the hopes that we can identify some of those characteristics. But what we're asking for in this topic is what are the aspects related to exercise that can be used to enhance resilience or reduce stress. So this one's a little more focused, not just on being stressed and how do we enhance resilience, but how can we specifically use exercise to reduce stress and enhance resilience. I hope that is responsive to your question. The team mentioned making sure the study would be doable across or doable aboard the ISS. Is that where proposed study will take place, or will it be replicated there? Also, is it correct to assume that proposed flight studies would be preferred? For the exercise regimen, it would be preferred there, primarily because the exercise needs to occur in that microgravity environment. That's where we're going to have to use it eventually. However, there can be a component of that validates it on the ground and then moves it into ISS. So it depends on the approach. In terms of countermeasures for stress reduction, would team designs be considered for countermeasures? For example, collaborative stress reduction could produce better outcomes for psychosocial resilience. Again, it depends on the conceptualization. We haven't targeted this as a team approach, but with a really effective justification and conceptualization, if it's clear we could get an individual response, because that's really what we're trying to identify. What are the individual changes? Because we know that there's great variability from person to person. And when you take a team approach, you've introduced inter-individual variability that will be more difficult to sort out what was working for which type of outcome. So again, it depends on the conceptualization. How do we see the research that has been and is being done on resiliency? Part of that is just kicking off. And so there's a robust literature out there. The problem with resiliency, as we all know, is there's about 114 different definitions, at least there was about 2 years ago, of what it means, what resiliency means. So that is part of the challenge initially, is to identify what is it that you're identifying with regard to the resiliency that you're going to try to enhance. And so, in essence, if we look at it as being adaptive in the face of adversity, so if we put you in a high-stress, high-demand environment, how do we demonstrate that you're able to robustly respond without showing a cumulative stress effect that diminishes your ability to perform and respond to the demands that are going to be placed on you? That's sort of what we will view resiliency as. And so the literature that's out there, part of what we have ongoing now is a nice review of the literature on resiliency. Unfortunately, it's not turned into us yet. We haven't received that as a deliverable, and that is not due for about some time yet, maybe another 6 months to a year. So we're not likely to have that, but there are other reviews of resiliency that are out there that you can pull from in the literature. Would stress relief, small molecule drugs delivered from a carrier, be considered as an alternative method comparing to exercise? Again, it depends on the conceptualization and the ability to demonstrate the efficacy of that, and to, you know, as presented here, introducing a small molecule drug, we would need to know if it was safe to do that before we could use it. So there's a challenge without understanding more about the nature of that question. It's hard to be completely responsive to it. But if there is a way for a molecular change to occur that culminates in an enhanced ability to deal with stress or to enhance resiliency, that is within the research domain criteria and of formalism that we are looking at in terms of how do those initial changes culminate into a change of behavior that makes the situation better. Is the study on blood oxygen concentration monitoring under microgravity appropriate? Answer is no. Dealing with exhaled CO2, and it depends on if you're looking at these with regard to exercise. If that's the exercise component that Lindsay's asking about, then certainly within the exercise component, those would be appropriate considerations to look at max VO2 level, respiratory quotients, to see how someone is being responsive to the exercise. Does HERO NASA provide the human test subjects within HERA and on station? Yes. For the pre-proposal for topic 2, how would it be received, reviewed if we provide some different options for an experimental design for the exercise countermeasures that would allow for greater fidelity in informing writing a step 2 if invited for a full proposal? We always welcome excellent experimental designs that offer a conceptualization that would offer greater fidelity. So if that was, but what we want to make sure of in the step 1s, we need to make sure that we can understand what is going to be proposed in the step 2. That's how we make that determination. So we just encourage you to make sure that it's clear how that step 2 is going to give us that greater fidelity, that the approach that's going to be used. Yes, and it's important note that we cannot give feedback on your step 1s. And how do you test on a human if that's related to exercise? That's where we would look for you to propose, and it depends on which topic you're referring to, whether it's the exercise topic or the sensory stimulation topic. So we're not sure we can characterize the response. And yes, Lindsay, we agree, depending on the conceptualization and what it is you're going to measure, that's just in what way the blood oxygen concentration is going to impact on stress and resilience. That's the conceptualization we're looking for.
Brad asked a question, did not find a specific format for the step 1. Is it available? Yes, the requirements for the step 1 are delineated in the call. It's a 5-page requirement for the document. We're looking up the exact place right now. 1 second, please. So at the top of page D22, there's information on the Step 1 proposal. In particular, it's if you look up Hero Overview document section F.3, you'll find all the details there.
Isometric lines and photometric endeavors would seem relevant for the acceptance of behavior modification of gravity proposal, like seeing Earth's rotational deflection. If this is referring to topic 3 with regard to sensory stimulation, again, what we'll defer to is a very good experimental conceptualization with plausible evidence as to how that might alter that sensory stimulation is what would need to be reflected in the Step 1.
The next question is, first Brad says, thank you, you're welcome. Dorothy asks, do proposals from international proposals stand the same chance of being accepted, provided that they are supported by a national funding agency and the proposal is of a similar quality to U.S. proposals? Yes, that is correct. With international proposals, however, you will need to provide a letter of support from that funding agency prior to the approval, prior to the submittal of a Step 2.
So if proposing for a HERA analog, HERA analogs are 45-day missions, so there's a 2-week pre-mission, 45-day in-mission, and then about a 10-day post-mission, post-assessment. A typical ISS mission would be somewhere between 6 months, or if it's proposed against one of the longer duration, potentially 9 months at the most, in most cases. So, but probably safe to propose a 6-month ISS mission.
Do we have any further questions? We don't see anyone typing on this end. We see lots of no mores and thank yous. We're glad this was helpful. Since I see no other questions, we will call this a wrap. Good luck, all of you, with writing your Step 1s. We look forward to reading them, and we hope we get to work with you all again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.